Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we are taking a look at the Dragon Guard, a Dragonknight character for playing Elder Scrolls. Now please remember, all my character builds are more casual to roleplay kind of play style. They are not made for meta play, they are made to just play the game and have fun. That's it. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the build. Now, the Dragon Guard is designed on the concept of what you see in game. So when you play the game, you ever run across those NPCs that use Dragonknight abilities? They'll use like Flame Whip, they'll use like the Fire Breath, and they just seem like, wow, how are they doing this kind of thing? Well, it took me a little bit to figure that out, and I broke it down and created the Dragon Guard based on that idea of those character types. And I've always been interested in having a character that plays that way, because I always felt like it would be super cool to be able to run around with a sword and shield, breathing fire, throwing out fireballs, you know, doing different things while tanking or while just playing the game. So that's where the theme for this character came from. So let's jump into it by taking a look at what we are. Dragon Guard character. Now, you can be any race. The only reason why I chose Dark Elf is because Dark Elf is going to give you the better opportunity to play this way. High Elf is another good one, and so is Orc, and any race can really pull it off. But Dark Elf can really pull off this race because of how the racial benefits work for them. So as you can see, we have 54 into health, 10 into stamina. This is just going to give us a good balance in our overall health pool. Now, this character is primarily a tank character, but they can play other roles if they need to, just by switching out a few things, like switching out your attribute points, switching out your weapon types that you're using, switching things around to give you better playability with different types of tools. So, like I said, right now it's set up for its primary role, which is tank. We have 54 into health, 10 into stamina. This allows us to have that stamina pool just barely high enough or higher than our magicka. And that 35k health really allows us to maximize our survivability. Now, you're going to see our recoveries are kind of low. Don't stress it. It's meant to be that way, because you're going to be using other things to get resources back. You're going to be using synergies. You're going to be using heavy attacks. You're going to be playing like a tank. Alright, weapon damage 2352 with a 28% weapon critical. Don't worry about these when you're in tank form, your criticals so much. It's more about the spell damage and weapon damage that you're going to be focusing on, because a lot of your abilities are built off of those. Moving on down here, we have 22,000 spell resist with a 19k physical resist. I had somebody tell me that that's really low for resistances until you buff up. Then you go to 28k spell with a 24k physical. A lot of people tank a lot of content in the game with about this much resistances. Even the hardest, more challenging content, like veteran content, they'll tank with this kind of resistance. Alright, moving on. We have the Lord Mundus Stone. This is going to give us increased max health. We do use tri-stat food for this character because we are more of a hybrid character, so we want to take advantage of the tri-stat food. Moving on over here, as you can see, we do have Dubious Cameron Throne for when we want to play more stamina based. It does make us a little weaker, but it does give us better recoveries. We do have Spell Power Pots and Warrior Power Pots, along with the Long Fin Pasty and Melon Sauce. And remember, all this stuff is just stuff that I suggest. Everything in this build is just a suggestion. It is not a requirement to, if you want to play this character, you have to play it this way. If you can find other sets or other tools that are going to work better for you as a player, use them. This is just suggestion. This is just an idea. Alright, moving on. As you can see, we do have a sword and mace in our inventory along with a bow. That is for when we are playing damage dealer. And then moving on to our sets. Starting with our monster set, we are using the Grothar set. Now, Grothar is a really interesting set for tank to use because it's more of a damage dealing set. but it's kind of nice how it works. It adds, on the one piece, 1096 max magicka. This helps with increase your magicka pool. And then the two piece, when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create lava pools that swirl around you, dealing 2,376 flame damage to all enemies within 8 meters of you every 1 second for 5 seconds. This effect can occur every 10 seconds. If you play this character right, this thing's just pretty much non-stop. It stays up all the time. It's constantly proccing. So it's really nice to get that little bit of extra damage in, even in a group setting. The next set we're using is Hunting's Rage. And Hunting's Rage is primarily a set to boost stamina damage. And it helps you really well with playing the role of a tank, but also as a damage dealer, because you can take advantage of that higher crit rate with that higher weapon damage, and depending on what skills you're using. So, and then moving on to the next set we are using Silks of the Sun. This is a really interesting combination. I never would have thought of this if I didn't test it. And the reason I thought I was going to use the fire set like I normally do for the Dragon Guard, and I said, well, what if I put Silks of the Sun on this character? What would that do? So I combined the two to see, and as you can see, the 2-piece adds max health, the 3-piece adds max magicka, the 4-piece adds spell damage, and the 5-piece adds spell damage to your flame damage abilities. Most of the damage your character is going to deal is going to be fire-based, because Dragon Knights are built around fire. So taking advantage of that fire-based damage really allows you to be able to play as a damage dealer and as a tank, because you can take advantage of that fire damage when you're in tank form. Because, like I said, a lot of your damage abilities, like Magma Shell, is a flame damage ability. Boosting that is going to give you more damage. Draw Essence deals magic damage, but it does flame damage when you exhale. So this is going to boost its damage. Now, Choking Talons does magic damage. It doesn't do flame damage, but that magic damage you can still take from that one set. And then this does flame damage. And then a lot of class abilities use flame damage. So utilizing these two sets in combination just allows you to build out more for that idea of, hey, my guy's a dragon guard. Like, my guy uses dragon abilities to be a protector and a guardian of the people. And that's the whole premise of this. So going back to Hunting's Rage, 2-piece adds weapon critical, 3-piece max stamina, 4-piece weapon critical, 5-piece is extra weapon damage. Now, the reason why this set is so good for this, like I said, is one, it gives you that higher weapon critical, it gives you a little bit more max stamina, and then it gives you good weapon damage. That weapon damage can be used on a lot of abilities that you might use either playing a damage dealer or playing a tank. Like if you're using Vigor. Vigor is based off of a stamina, so if you want to use Echoing Vigor, you can see here it's going to heal for 7,788 with this particular setup. This particular race and class combo with this gear set. Now, if you're playing, like, say, a High Elf, you're going to have less value in this, but it's only like 7,300 and something. That's the difference. It's not much. So you can still play a High Elf with this character and still play it effectively, or even an Argonian. Argonians make great Dragon Knight characters. I don't know why, they just do. Alright, so now that we've gone over the sets, let's go over the traits on the gear and the enchantments on the stuff, and then we'll move on to skills. So looking at the monster set, we are running a Divine's Helm with a Tri-Stat. This way you can take advantage of Mundus stones to just give you a little bit more advantage. And you're going to have Divines on both your head and your legs. On the chest, you're going to have Reinforced. This is going to boost your resistances by 16%. So you're going to get that 3,215 armor rating. And that applies to both spell and physical. On the smaller pieces, you're going to use Sturdy, and this is going to increase your block cost capabilities. This is why this one works better primarily as a tank than as a damage dealer, but it can still play a damage dealer because you can take advantage of the divines, the 2 divines pieces. Alright, moving on to the jewelry, or sorry, not the jewelry, the smaller pieces that are sturdy. We have a max magicka in the belt and the shoulders. This way you can build out your magicka pool. And then in the gloves, we do have stamina, and in the boots we have stamina. This, again, to build out your character to be more versatile with both magic and stamina and health at the same time. That's why we run tri-stats in all the big pieces to hybridize. Then we use the smaller pieces just to give us that oomph that we need. Now, moving on to the jewelry, you can set this up however you want, again, on the traits and the enchants, but I like this particular setup because it works so well. We use Trirune on both these rings. This is going to give you that hybridization, and we're using 2 weapon damage. Now you're going to probably wonder, why are you building out so much weapon damage and not max magicka? Silks of the Sun gives us enough magicka, like spell damage. It does. We don't need more of that. So that's why we build more into this. And then with the jewelry, we are using a Infused Shield play enchant to make us more effective tank. So again, everything we do for this character is primarily to be a tank type character when you naturally play them. But if you want to play them more DPS, you can. You can just go change out your attributes to all stamina if you want, or you can do like 40 into stamina, 34 or whatever, 24 into magicka. You have that option to do that, to play the rest of the content in the game. But if you are going to focus primarily on damage, I would suggest going everything into stamina and just utilizing the Silks of the Sun set along with that. Alright, now moving over to the weapons and stuff. Starting with the front bar, we have a sword and shield. The shield has a tri-stat with a sturdy trait. This, again, helps us with blocking. And being a Dragonknight, you get extra block capabilities. So, really good. The next thing is we have the Sword of the Sun with a decisive trait. This is when you gain ultimate, you have a 20% chance to gain additional ultimate. And then on top of that, you absorb, you have an absorbed stamina enchant on here. This will deal physical damage and restore stamina. This is another way that you can hold your resources better if you throw heavy attacks. It's a matter of just learning how to play the character. On the back bar, we have a 2-handed weapon, the Great Sword of the Sun. This one has a Crusher enchant. You can use an Ice Staff back here. That would probably be more effective. But I love using 2-handed, especially with this character setup. So as you can see, we have an Infused Trait on here. This one increases weapon enhancement effect by 30% and reduces the enchantment cooldown by 50%. So pretty much this thing will go up for 5 seconds, stay, drop, and you can reapply it. Like right in 5 seconds. Because that's what the cooldown thing does. And then the increase increases its capabilities. So this one will reduce the target's spell and physical resistance by 2,108. And that's really good. This just helps you kill things faster. And not just you, but your group. Alright. Now that you guys have seen all the gear and stuff, I am going to go over the other weapons. So when you do play this as a damage dealer, I suggest using a bow or a fire staff on the back bar with an infused weapon damage enchant. And then dual wield, I would suggest a sword infused with flame damage, a mace and Nirnhoned with absorbed magicka. Now you guys are probably going to say, why not absorb stamina this way? Because you're wearing heavy armor, you're going to be able to get resources back when you heavy attack, and you're actually going to get more back from dual wield than you will from sword and board, because you do more damage. So heavy attack to get your resources. But you can still pull off a pretty decent DPS rotation with this on a damage dealer setup. With the bow and the dual wield, I was able to get up to 35k. So that's pretty good. And that's damage dealer. Now moving on to the skills. Now you guys are going to see that I have every class ability and passive unlocked. The reason why is because you never know what situation you might need different skills. Like somebody asked me, why would you use Stone Giant? It's really bad. Well, if I'm playing a DPS character, having Stone Giant allows me a little bit more survivability when I'm playing by myself. And it deals 100% more damage if the target is successfully stunned. So this thing can do a lot more damage than what you think. And then it grants you Minor Ward and Minor Resolve, increasing spell and physical resist. So I'm just pointing out a few skills here and why I have them unlocked. But unlock the ones that are going to reflect your playstyle the best. Then when it comes to weapon skills, because we are primarily sword and shield, unlock the sword and shields that are going to best reflect your ability to play that character. The same thing goes with the dual wield, two-handed, and bow. Those are the primary weapons this character uses. Now, if you want to use Destruction Staff, you'll have to unlock the Destruction Staff skill line. If you want to be a healer, you have to unlock the Resto Staff skill line. But remember, you are limited in how many skill points you have available. So, choose wisely. Moving on to armor, light armor, take the top 3 passives. These are going to help you in the long run. This one's going to help reduce your magicka cost. It's going to give you some mag recovery, but we're really not worried about the mag recovery. We're more interested in that reduced magicka cost. This is going to give you higher spell resist, even though you are a Dragonknight. Dragonknights do get a passive called Scaled Armor, which increases their spell resistance by 3,300. They also get Iron Skin, which increases the amount of damage you block by 10%. This is why Dragonknights can make tanking really easy. And then moving on to medium armor, the top 2 and the bottom one. The top one mainly for when you're playing damage. It boosts your weapon critical. And then Windwalker for the stamina reduced cost. And then Athletics for the reduced dodge roll and the increased sprint speed. Heavy armor, go with all the passives. All of them are going to give you benefits to playing this, especially Juggernaut is going to increase your max health by 10%. Constitution is how you're going to get resource management when you take damage. And Revitalize for when you heavy attack. This increases the magic and stamina your heavy attacks restore by 25%. Moving on to world skills, you can be a vampire with this. I would suggest not, though, unless you're playing a dark elf. Any other race, I would suggest not, because you're going to take a lot of fire damage in certain areas, and unless you have a really good healer with you, there's a high chance you're going to die more than stay alive. Alright, so with the soul magic, I'm only going to suggest these two. I'm going to quit suggesting these ones, because these are really just player choice. But Soul Summons and, Soul Shatter also. Soul Summons allows you to revive every hour without a Soul Gem, and then Soul Lock, whenever you kill an enemy with a weapon ability, you get a 10% chance to automatically fill an empty Soul Gem. If I could tell you guys, I have a character right now on live that has been running around with 300 filled Soul Gems and 158 empty Soul Gems, because I get so many empty Soul Gems playing the game. Alright, Fighters Guild, make sure you unlock all the passives and abilities, because, like, again, you never know. You might want to use some of these abilities when you're playing DPS, like maybe Evil Hunter to boost your stamina, your Major Savagery, or maybe you want to use Silver Shard so you can get a ricochet arrow attack that also slows enemies. It's also really good for a tank. Surprisingly works well. Mages Guild, again, all the passives and abilities, never know. Sigil Quarter, same thing, I forgot to unlock the passives, that's fine, I can do that real quick. I didn't test any of these with this character, but I will tell you this elemental weapon with this character is the one I did test, and it is pretty awesome. Undaunted, again, all the skills and abilities, because you never know. Like, a lot of people praise Igneous Shield because of how strong it is. There's Igneous Shield. There's Spike Bone Shield. The reason I like Spike Bone Shield is, one, it does cost stamina, but it's also a bigger shield. On top of that, now this one does do redirect damage back to the enemy. 41% of any direct damage you take that you absorb goes back to the enemy. So this is really nice for that. But I like using the Igneous Shield because it applies a shield to you and your allies. As you can see, the shield it applies to your allies is going to be 3,558 damage shield. You get 8,897. and then you also gain major mending. So this is going to be better in the long run. Bone Shield is there for more or less when you're solo playing. Alright. And then also get the Undaunted passives. These are super important. And also make sure you run a 5-1-1 setup on your character. What that means, I'm not telling you you have to, but it does help because you can take advantage of this Undaunted metal, which increases your max health, stamina, and magic by 2% for each type of armor you wear. So this character is wearing a medium helm, light belt, everything else is heavy. And the reason why is so that way I get the 5-piece benefits from wearing 5 heavy, and I get the 1-piece benefits from wearing the medium and the light, but I also get that 6% increase in my stats. Moving on to Alliance War, again, take the passives and abilities that are going to best reflect your ability to play. If you focus more in PvP, some of these abilities are going to be better for that purpose, and some are going to be better in both PvP and PvE. It just depends on how you choose to play. Racial skills, Dark Elf skills, Dark Elf passives, make sure you get these if you're playing a Dark Elf. Any race, make sure you get your passives. I'm not even going to explain what they do because I will be doing videos later explaining all the racial passives individually. Alright, moving on to crafting. Alchemy, medicinal use, very good. And when using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer. Normally, your potions only last like maybe 15 seconds, I think it is, on average. But when you have this, they last 43 or something, or 47. So they just last longer. And then provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur, these allow your foods to last longer. Your food and drinks, 20 minutes longer. So really good. Now let's go ahead and look at the skills we have on the bar. Now these skills are primarily set up for tanking, again. So when I take this into the dungeon, I'm going to show you in its tanking roll. I'm not going to show you in its damage roll. So you can see we have Pierce Armor as our first ability. This does a little bit of damage up front. It's really nice. It taunts the enemy for 15 seconds and also afflicts the enemy with Major Fracture and Major Breach, reducing their spell and physical resistance by 5,280 for 12 seconds. Now the next ability I have is Deep Slash. I like Deep Slash personally. This is just my preferred choice because it does damage up front. It does damage to 2 other enemies. As you can see, it does X amount of physical damage to one target and an additional amount of damage to 2 other nearby enemies, and reduces their movement speed by 60%. So this applies to 3 targets. When I'm playing in a dungeon, I hate when trash gets around me. So I like to use abilities that will hold them or slow them as a tank. This is what I use primarily for that. Also, afflict all enemies hit with Minor Maim, reducing their damage down by 15%. So it does apply Minor Maim to 3 targets, not just 1. Next ability we have on our bar is Igneous Shield. As you can see, call the earth to your defense, granting a damage shield for nearby allies that absorbs X amount of damage. Your damage shield absorbs X amount of damage, and the portion of this ability scales off your max health. So this shield does scale off your max health. The higher health pool you have, the more shield strength you get out of it. And then you also gain Major Mending, increasing your healing done by 25% for 3 seconds. So it's really good to pop this and then use the next ability, Green Dragon's Blood. Draw on your Draconic Blood to heal for 36% of your missing health. You also gain Major Fortitude, Major Endurance, and Minor Vitality, increasing your health recovery and stamina recovery by 20%, and your healing received by 8% for 23 seconds. Overall, great ability to use. Next ability we have is a protective ability. This one is called Absorb Magic. Bolster your defense, absorbing up to 20,000 or X amount of damage from the next spell projectile cast at you, and healing for 16% of your max health. While you have a shield equipped and this ability slotted, the amount of damage you can block is increased by 8%, and the cost of blocking is reduced by 8%. That's one of the reasons why I build all that block cost into the character, because being a Dragon Knight, you can take advantage of that greater block cost reduction and how much damage you can block. Next, we have Magma Shell. Magma Shell is here because it ignites the molten lava in your veins, limiting incoming damage by 3% of your max health, and dealing 1,004 flame damage to nearby enemies for each second for 12 seconds. When activated, nearby allies gain a damage shield for 116% of their max health for 10 seconds. It's a great support ability for your group. Moving on to the back bar, where we have our two-handed. We have Draw Essence. Now this one I really like because channel Draconic Energy to suck in the air around you, dealing X amount of magic damage to nearby enemies and healing for 110% of the damage caused. After 2.5 seconds, you exhale, dealing 5,019 flame damage to nearby enemies and restoring 10% of the ability's cost for each enemy hit as Magicka. So this is just, when I'm in a group and I'm doing trash, I'm using this ability, because I want to kill those things just as fast as anybody else. Next ability we have is Brawler. This is a great ability. This is mainly just to cleave through enemies to apply Crusher. The first enemy you hit will get Crusher applied to them, and then they'll take damage, but all enemies hit take damage. And then you also gain a damage shield that absorbs X amount of damage for 6 seconds. Each enemy hit increases the shield's strength by 50%. Now this shield is based off of your max weapon damage and max stamina. So the higher stamina pool you have, the higher strength this shield goes. The higher weapon damage you have, the more shield strength you get out of this. It's just there to keep you alive. The next ability we have is Choking Talons. Call forth Talons from the ground, dealing X amount of magic damage to enemies near you and immobilizing them for 4 seconds. Enemies hit are afflicted with minor maim, reducing their damage done by 15% for 7 seconds. And then an ally near the Talons can activate the Ignite synergy, dealing X amount of magic damage to all enemies held within them. Really great synergy. And that's the nice thing about this. If you notice, we have a lot of synergies. The next ability we have is called Unrelenting Grip. This one launched a fiery chain to grasp and pull an enemy to you, dealing X amount of flame damage. And grants major expedition, increasing your movement speed by 30% for 4 seconds. If the target cannot be pulled, you restore 100% of the ability's cost as Magicka. The attack cannot be dodged or reflected. So that means they can't dodge it, and I can pull them to me. As you can see, it took the cost and gave me it right back because that thing cannot be pulled. Moving on to the next ability, we are using Hardened Armor. Release your inner dragon to gain major resolve and major ward, increasing your physical resistance and spell resistance by 5,280 for 20 seconds. You gain a damage shield that absorbs up to X amount of damage for 6 seconds. This portion of the ability scales off your max health. While active, your armor returns X amount of magic damage to all enemies that use a direct damage attack against you. So when you have this up, as long as you're taking damage, you're gonna reflect some of it back. The best part is that if you wait for that shield to wear off, you use your Igneous Shield, then swap bars and do this, you'll get the damage reflected all through 15,000 stuff, because it has to go through your Igneous Shield first before it gets to your other shield. See, when you shield stack, that's how it works. So it's really, really effective in helping you deal more damage to the enemies around you. And the last ability we have is one that a lot of tanks use. It is that you get this in the PvP, and that is Aggressive Warhorn. Now, you sound a horn to rally your forces, increasing you and your allies' max magicka and max stamina by 10% for 30 seconds. You and your allies gain major force, increasing your critical damage done by 15% for 9 seconds. It's a really great ability because it doesn't just apply to your allies, it also applies to you. So you also get that major force, and you get that 10% max magic and stamina. Alright, so now that you guys have seen all the skills and gear and everything, we're going to jump over to the CP and go through this really quick. Starting with the red tree, we have 66 in Ironclad. This is going to reduce your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 22%. Over here we have 31 into Thick Skin, reducing your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 56 into Hardy, reducing your damage taken from physical poison disease damage by 12%. And then 56 in Elemental Defender, reducing your damage taken from Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 12%. And just to let you guys know, Hardy, or Thick Skinned, and Ironclad do stack with these. So this 13% stacks with these 12%, giving you 25%. This 22% stacks with these 12%, giving you 34% damage reduction from direct damage and damage over time. Moving on over here, we have 40 into Bastion, increasing the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. And then 2 into Heavy Armor Focus, just to kind of build up your physical resistance. Moving on over to the green tree, we have 40 into Warlord, reducing your break free costs by 16%. We have 16 into Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing the cost of Bash by 10%. And then moving on over here, we have 43 into Health Recovery. I know, why would you do this? For those who want to maybe drop the block cost, the Shield Play enchant, and put a Health Recovery there, this way you can build for a little bit of Health Recovery and take advantage of it for being a Dragonknight. If you don't want to use this, you have 43 points to just kind of float around. Mooncalf, Arcanist, or Healthy, your choice. 75 into Tenacity. This increases your max magicka and stamina. Your fully charged heavy attacks restore by 14%. And then moving on over here, we have 40 into Tumbling, reducing your dodge roll cost by 16%. And 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. Moving on to the blue tree, we have 43 into Blessed, increasing your healing done by 10%. 23 into Elfborn, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 10%. 43 in Elemental Expert, increasing your Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. And then moving on into the middle tree here, we have 31 into Physical Weapon Expert. This is going to increase your light and heavy attack damage by 18%. And we have 40 into Master at Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. Over here we have 43 into Mighty, increasing your physical poison disease damage by 10%. 23 into Precise Strikes, increasing your critical healing and critical stamina abilities by 10%. And then 23 into Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 10%. We had 1 point left over. We put it into Piercing. Now, one of the things that I like to do personally is take this down to 20 and then take this up to 35. The reason why is that it unlocks Butcher, so it increases my damage done with light and heavy attacks when the enemies drop below 5%, or 25 by 5% when enemies drop below 25% health. And it just allows me greater damage output for when I'm playing this character in any role, tank healer or tank or damage dealer. Alright, so now that I've shown you guys that, I'm going to go ahead and take this thing over into a dungeon so you can see how it looks in action. So we're going to go ahead and jump over here to my favorite testing dungeon right now, the Depths of Malatar. Once they add the next dungeon DLC, I will be using those dungeons for testing and showing you guys how these characters can work in those situations. So just so you can see, and I'm going to pick the one I want to use out of the two. But pretty much Depths of Malatar came with the Wrathstone DLC, which came out right before Elsweyr, and it's got the latest dungeons that are supposedly the most difficult, most challenging dungeons in the game right now. And they are pretty rough. So, right, let's go in here and let's kick some booty. Now, I'm not going to use my tripods right away. I'm just going to buff up. And there you go, all those enemies are dead. Moving on to the next room. Buffing up our resistances again. Doing this. Come on, come get me. Because I'm going to breathe some fire on you guys. Since Brawler doesn't bleed anymore, it just applies the shield, I like to use it for that purpose, just to get that shield up and everything, so... I like to use that exhale. That thing does some amazing damage. Especially when you can do that, and you can just blast these guys. Right. Enemies are dead. We're going to go in to face the first boss. Now, I am going to use a potion to get started. Use my buff. I'm going to hit him with chains just to get his attention. I'm going to go ahead and use Warhorn so I can buff up my max magicka and max stamina pools, not just for me, but remember, I'm also doing this for my group. But yeah, I could sit here and fight this guy all day. I'm going to let him go ahead and kill me. But this way you guys can just see how effective this build works. It is actually really powerful and can take a beating in the right hands. I know how to play Dragonknight. I've played Dragonknight for off and on for 3 years. So I'm not going to say I'm the best player with it, but I do know how it works. So that's what matters. And yeah. And that is the Dragon Guard, guys. I hope you guys liked it. I love this build for when I'm playing, like, when I used to play the Dragonknight, I used to play this way. And I really loved it. I really had a blast with it. But unfortunately, I don't have that that character as a Dragonknight anymore. I made him into a Necromancer, and is actually my Dark Paladin build. So, but that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I hope you guys liked it. You guys know what's coming next. If you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.